I didn't mean to fall in love with him. Hell, I didn't even know I could. But when you're 17 and your heart is a messy song with no lyrics, sometimes the wrong person becomes the only melody that makes sense. The first time I saw Mr. Everett Langley, he was yelling at the piano. Not metaphorically, he was literally swearing at it. "You tone-deaf piece of junk," he muttered, smacking a key that refused to play in tune. I laughed out loud, and that's how our story began. He turned, startled, then smiled, that quiet, devastating smile that seemed to light up the entire music room. "You must be the new kid," he said, voice low, a bit husky. "Grab a seat, unless you're planning on heckling me the whole semester." That was him, confident, sarcastic, a little broken, and absolutely magnetic. I was just a nobody from Maple Creek High, the kind of kid who faded into the back row, too scared to sing, too careful to dream. But Everett, he made me believe I could. Every day after class, I'd stay a little longer under the excuse of practicing. He'd sit beside me on the piano bench, his shoulder brushing mine, the faint smell of cedarwood cologne and coffee clinging to him. His fingers would guide mine gently over the keys, and every touch burned a hole in my chest I couldn't fill. "You've got something special, Eli," he said one evening. "You just don't believe it yet." But what I believed in, what terrified me most, was him. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your name and who you were seen with. Rumors traveled faster than sound. A boy spending too much time with his teacher? That was enough to light fires you couldn't put out. Still, I kept going back. Music was my excuse. Love was my secret. It started with stolen glances, then late-night texts about song lyrics. Then the one moment that changed everything, the night of the senior recital. I froze on stage. My hands wouldn't move. The lights felt too bright, the air too thick. And then, through the panic, I saw him standing by the piano, nodding once, silently mouthing, "I'm here." That was enough. I played like the world was listening. After the applause died down, I found him alone backstage. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. "You were incredible," he said, voice trembling just a little. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, "I did it for you." His breath caught. The space between us became something electric, dangerous. For one heartbeat, the world held its breath, then he stepped back. "Eli," he murmured, eyes dark and unreadable. "Don't." Felt like a slap, though he never raised a hand. He left town that summer. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. I tried to move on, went to college, buried myself in music that didn't sound like him. But every song I wrote still had his fingerprints in it. Years passed. Life happened. I got gigs, made friends, built walls. But the ache never left. And then, out of nowhere, a message. "Everett Langley. Heard you're performing in New York. Congratulations, Eli." I stared at the screen for hours, then typed back 2 words I'd never said to him. "Thank you." We didn't talk again after that. Not until the day I returned to Maple Creek, the day I packed up my things for good. The town hadn't changed much. The music school was still there, old and faded. I stood in front of it, memories crashing in like a storm. I told myself I was ready to leave. That's when I heard the familiar voice behind me. Running away again? I turned, and there he was, Everett. Older, tired, but still the same eyes, warm, guilty, full of the things he never said. "I thought you moved on," I said quietly. "I tried," he admitted. "But every song I heard reminded me of you." "Funny," I said, smiling bitterly. "You were the one who taught me to feel through music." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I was your teacher, Eli. I was supposed to help you find your voice, not steal it for myself." "You didn't steal anything," I said. "You gave me everything I needed to survive." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The town around us was silent, as if holding its breath. Then he whispered, "You're leaving again, aren't you?" "Yeah," I said. "For good this time." Everett looked at me, something breaking inside him. "Then let me do something right for once." And before I could move, he kissed me. It wasn't the perfect kiss, it was desperate, clumsy, years too late, but it was real. and it shattered every wall I'd built around my heart. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "I should have told you then," he said. "That I don't," I interrupted, voice trembling. "Not unless you mean it." "I mean it," he said fiercely. "I always have." The train whistle echoed in the distance, my train, waiting. For a second, I thought about running again. But something in his voice stopped me. "Stay," he whispered. "Stay, and let me love you properly this time." I didn't stay. I boarded the train with tears in my eyes, watching the town fade into the horizon. But as the sun set and the music in my headphones swelled, I realized something: love doesn't always need to end in staying. Sometimes, just knowing you were loved is enough to begin again. When I reached New York, I wrote a new song. It wasn't about him this time. It was about forgiveness, about healing. Still, somewhere in every note, there was a whisper, a memory of a man who taught me how to play, how to feel, how to love. And maybe, in some small town miles away, Everett Langley sat by a broken piano, listening to that same song, finally at peace. The night Eli left town, it rained like the sky couldn't bear to see him go. I remember standing at my window, watching the headlights fade, every drop against the glass echoing the words I never said. I told myself it was for the best, that he deserved a life untouched by scandal, free from the weight of my mistakes. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. You don't spend years teaching music without understanding when something inside you has gone silent. After Eli left, that's exactly what happened to me: silence. No notes, no chords, no reason to play. The piano keys felt cold, foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I'd sit there for hours, staring at the sheet music we used to play together, remembering the way he'd frown in concentration, tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth as if he could will himself to perfection. God, he was beautiful. Not in the way the world usually sees beauty, but in the way light hits a window and turns dust into gold. And I let him go. I told myself I was being noble, responsible. I was the adult, the teacher, the man who should know better. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a coward staring back. The town didn't forget either. Maple Creek had a way of whispering your sins until you started believing them. People talked about why I stopped teaching, why I sold my house, why I couldn't walk into the music room without flinching. They didn't know the truth. Hell, I barely did. All I knew was that I'd fallen in love with someone I had no right to love. The first time I realized it was love, I'd just finished helping him with a composition. He'd written this melody, fragile, almost trembling, and asked what it was missing. I said, "It needs a heartbeat." He looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "Then play it." I did. And when I did, he smiled like he'd found it, the missing piece. That smile haunted me, still does. Years passed. I taught at other schools, tried to build something new. But every student who sat at a piano reminded me of him. Every stage light, every performance, every tremor of a chord that lingered too long, all of it pulled me back to Maple Creek, to the boy who played like his soul was on fire. When I saw his name on the billboard in New York, Eli Carter, live at the Blue Room, my heart stopped. He made it, and the first thing I felt wasn't pride. It was regret. Regret that I couldn't tell him how proud I was. Regret that I'd built a life so empty that even his success hurt to look at. I sent that message, congratulations, thinking it would be enough. It wasn't. Because the truth is, love doesn't disappear just because you stop talking. It just waits quietly, stubbornly, until the right moment to break you open again. That moment came the day I saw him standing outside the music school. He looked older, sharper, more confident, but there was still that same softness in his eyes, the same mix of fire and fear. When he turned and saw me, time folded in on itself. "Running away again?" I'd asked, trying to sound casual. But my voice betrayed me, too shaky, too desperate. The look on his face said everything. He wasn't the same boy I'd left behind. He was a man now, one who'd learned to live without me. And yet, when I kissed him, it felt like no time had passed at all. After he left again, after that kiss that felt like both a beginning and an ending, I couldn't sleep. For nights, I replayed every word, every breath between us. "Stay, and let me love you properly this time," I'd said. And he didn't. But maybe he was right not to. Because love isn't about asking someone to stay where they've already grown too big for the cage. It's about being brave enough to open the door. Still, the silence hurt. I started writing again, not songs for the stage, but letters I'd never send. Pages and pages of words that began with "Dear Eli" and ended with "I'm sorry." One night, 3 months after he left, I heard his song for the first time. Came through the radio in my car while I was driving home. A simple melody, soft piano, quiet guitar, but I knew instantly it was his. It was the way the notes breathed between beats, the way the silence carried meaning. That was Eli, the boy who played like the world was listening. The DJ said, "This one's called Forgive Me," and I pulled over, heart pounding, because I could hear myself in it. Not just my lessons, not just the chords we practiced me. The guilt, the tenderness, the goodbye. By the time the song ended, I was crying not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Felt like he'd finally set us both free. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a ticket, Eli Carter, live at Carnegie Hall. On the back, in small handwriting, it said, "If you still believe in music, come." I went. The hall was enormous, glowing under golden chandeliers. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. And then he walked out confident, calm, a man who had turned heartbreak into art. When he saw me front row, seat A7, his fingers faltered for just a second. Then he smiled, the smallest, saddest smile, and began to play. The song was new. I'd never heard it before, but it was ours. The melody from that old Maple Creek classroom, the one he wrote when he was 17. The one missing a heartbeat. Except this time he'd found it. After the show, I waited backstage. My heart was a mess of nerves and hope. When he walked in, sweat still glistening on his temples, he looked at me with that same quiet understanding, as if he knew I'd come. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," he replied. "You made it. I wouldn't have missed it for the world." There was a pause. Then he smiled faintly. "Did you like the song?" "I loved it," I said. "It had your heart in it." He looked down, voice trembling. "It had yours too." I laughed softly. "Guess we were always writing duets, huh?" He met my eyes then, and this time, there was no guilt, no hesitation, just warmth. "You taught me how to play," he said, "but you also taught me how to feel. I didn't understand that until I lost you." "I never stopped loving you," I whispered. "I just didn't know how to love you right." We talked for hours. About everything we'd missed the years apart, the mistakes, the small victories. It didn't feel like rekindling something old. It felt like discovering something new, built on the ruins of who we used to be. When dawn broke, he walked me to the exit, and for the first time in years, the world felt light again. Before I left, he said something that stayed with me. "You once told me music needs a heartbeat," he said. "I think I finally found mine." I smiled. "I'm glad, Eli." Then I hesitated, took his hand, and said, "Just promise me you'll keep playing." "I will," he said, "but maybe next time you'll play with me." That night, I went home and reopened the old piano. It was dusty, the keys a little stiff, but when I pressed them, it sang again, warm, alive, forgiving. I realized then that love, like music, doesn't vanish. It waits for the right tempo, the right moment, the right hands to bring it back to life. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to listen. It had been almost a year since that night at Carnegie Hall. New York moved on quickly, faster than memories could catch up. I kept busy with tours, interviews, sound checks, the endless rhythm of success that left little space to think. But somehow, in every quiet moment, I still heard his music. Everett. He wasn't just a ghost from my youth anymore. He'd become a compass, quiet but steady, guiding every note I played. Every stage I walked onto, I carried him with me like an echo. And then one day, the echo turned into a voice. It was early spring when I found his letter in my dressing room. No return name, no fancy stationery, just plain paper folded in half. Inside, his handwriting slightly shaky. Familiar, "I'm moving to New York next month. I've been offered a teaching position at the academy. I'd like to see you if you still want that. For a long time, I just stared at it. My hands trembled. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a door cracking open after years of silence. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know if I was ready, because seeing him again meant reopening everything: the pain, the guilt, the what-ifs. But it also meant maybe, finally, a chance to start again. The first time we met after that was not planned. I was walking through Central Park, the early morning kind of quiet that only New York can have: gray light, soft wind, coffee in hand, when I heard piano music drifting from the open-air stage near Bethesda Fountain. And there he was, Everett Langley, sitting at the grand piano the city left out for anyone to play. No audience, no spotlight, just him and the music. His hair was a little grayer, his shoulders still strong. He looked peaceful, like a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. I froze. I wanted to walk away, but instead I just listened. He was playing our song, the one that had started it all. When he finished, I couldn't stop myself. I clapped softly. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, everything went still. The city disappeared. The years vanished. He smiled. "Hey, stranger." "Hey," I said, smiling back. "You always did like dramatic timing." He laughed, that deep, warm sound I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. We went for coffee after that. The conversation was awkward at first, full of small talk, half-laughed pauses, too many unspoken things hovering in the air. But gradually the walls began to fall. He told me about his new job, how he'd finally started composing again. I told him about the road, the exhaustion, the loneliness behind the applause. And somewhere between sips of coffee and old memories, I realized we were no longer broken versions of ourselves. We had both learned to heal, to live, to breathe without guilt. Maybe that's why this time felt different. Weeks passed. We started seeing each other again, not like before, but quietly, gently. Dinners after rehearsals, walks by the river, late nights talking about music, books, stupid things that didn't matter but somehow did. There was no rush, no pressure, just the comfort of presence. One night, he showed up at my apartment with an old, worn folder. "I wrote something," he said. "Thought maybe you'd help me finish it." Inside were sheets of music, carefully written, a duet. Two melodies weaving in and out, sometimes clashing, sometimes merging, always finding each other again. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "What's it called?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Second Movement." Because the first one ended too soon. My throat tightened. I looked at him and whispered, "Everett, are you sure you want this? Us?" He met my eyes, steady and calm. "Eli, I spent years being afraid of what people would think, of what I might lose. But you were the only thing I ever lost that actually mattered." That night, I kissed him again, not with desperation, not with fear, but with all the quiet certainty of two people who finally understood what love meant. There was no music playing, no grand confession. Just us. And it was enough. The world outside went on, horns blaring, sirens singing, but in that tiny apartment, time folded into stillness. When we finally pulled apart, he smiled. "You taste like coffee and peace." "And you?" I whispered. "Taste like home." We didn't hide anymore. Maybe it was because New York was kinder. Or maybe we had finally stopped caring about anyone else's permission. We played together at small clubs, side by side, him on piano, me on guitar. The chemistry between us was undeniable, not in a showy way, but in that easy, wordless rhythm that only comes from years of knowing someone's heart by sound alone. The audience didn't know our story. They didn't have to. They heard it in the way he looked at me before every downbeat. They heard it in the way I smiled when his hands brushed the keys. We weren't performing love. We were living it. One night after a show, an old man from the audience came up to us. "You two play like you've been together forever," he said, smiling. "You can't fake that kind of harmony." Everett glanced at me, then said softly, "We've been practicing for a long time." And I swear, in that moment, the last of the weight in my chest finally lifted. A few months later, he moved in with me. It wasn't some dramatic decision, no ring, no vows, just a quiet understanding that neither of us wanted to wake up alone anymore. We filled the apartment with music. Sheet music piled on the table, guitars leaning on chairs, coffee mugs everywhere. It was messy, chaotic, perfect. Every morning, he'd hum while making coffee, and I'd sit on the couch pretending not to watch him. Every evening, we'd sit by the window, writing songs that would never make it to an album, just songs for us. Sometimes he'd catch me staring and say, "What?" And I'd smile, "Just making sure you're real." He'd roll his eyes, laugh, and say, "I'm real, Eli." Finally, on the anniversary of our first lesson all those years ago in that tiny Maple Creek classroom, we went back. The building had changed. New students, new faces. But the piano was still there, old and slightly out of tune. We sat together on that same bench, side by side, like before. He touched the keys gently and whispered, "You ready?" I nodded. "Always." And we played. Not perfectly, not even close. But it didn't matter. The music was alive again, messy, beautiful, human. Halfway through, I looked at him and said, "You remember what you told me back then? That music needs a heartbeat." He smiled, eyes soft. "Yeah. And I remember telling you to find yours." I reached for his hand. I did. As the last note faded, the sunlight poured through the windows, that same golden light that had started everything. We sat there in silence for a long time, listening to the echo of the piano and our own quiet laughter. Then he leaned over and kissed my temple. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For never giving up on the song." Life didn't suddenly turn perfect after that. We still argued about tempo, missed flights, spilled coffee on sheet music. We still made mistakes, said stupid things, stayed up too late. But every morning we woke up and chose to try again, and that, I realized, was what love really was. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just choosing. Choosing to stay, choosing to listen, choosing each other. Years later, when we finally recorded Second Movement, it wasn't for fame or release. It was for us. The cover was simple, just a piano and a guitar. When the track ended, there was a faint laugh in the background. A whisper caught on the mic. My voice sang, "You taste like home." We kept it in. Because love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about the sound you make when you finally stop pretending you're not afraid to be heard. The last time I performed live, Everett was sitting in the front row, his hair silver under the lights, smiling that same quiet, devastating smile. I sang the final line of the song, looked at him, and said softly into the mic, "I found my heartbeat." The crowd applauded. But all I saw was him. He mouthed back, "Me too." And for the first time in our long, messy, beautiful story, I believed it. Love doesn't always arrive on time. But when it finally does, it stays. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it even sings. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.